Imagine stepping into a room where the man who said, "We don't need anything that Canada has," is now banking on Canadian-built icebreakers to patrol the Arctic. That man is President Trump, America's first champion turned reluctant ally. Could the US really rely on Canada for national security vessels? And what does that say about the limits of isolationism in a global, spin-off world? Trump's messaging has been consistent. From Davos to Truth Social, he's confidently declared that America doesn't need Canadian cars, lumber, oil, anything that they have. He even floated the idea of making Canada America's 51st state. Fast forward to now, America is dumping $8.6 billion into a major expansion of its Arctic icebreaker fleet. Sounds promising, until you realize US shipyards are swamped, inexperienced in polar designs, and backed up for years. That's where Canada comes in. A Canadian powerhouse, Davie Shipbuilding, North America's oldest, could be building Coast Guard vessels that are critical to US Arctic strategy. So much for, we don't need Canada, right? Let's zoom into the stark tension. The US is racing to build heavy polar security cutters, medium Arctic cutters, and medium, light icebreakers, each with rugged hulls, year-round Arctic readiness. But domestic shipyards are stretched thin. Skilled labor shortages, design complexity, and years-long delays plague the program. Estimates show the first heavy cutter might not deploy until 2029 or 2030, and costs keep rising. Enter Canada's premier shipyards, which boast proven Arctic shipbuilding experience, and may soon land US contracts using a national interest waiver. How did we arrive here, and what are the implications for US-Canada ties, Arctic security, and geopolitical leverage? That's what we are unpacking. Imagine Trump's America First policy, waving the flag for domestic manufacturing, but now quietly accelerating allied supply chains behind the scenes. Publicly, he dismisses Canada's value. Privately, the Arctic wars paint a different picture. Today, we explore how partisan grandstanding collides with strategic necessity, and what this means for global competition in the polar regions. So, let me ask you, does nationalism end where national security begins? Can a superpower stay America only when its own shipyards can't match demand? Is trusting Canada a failure of policy, or a pragmatic move? Let us know in the comments. In February at Davos and later on Truth Social, Trump insisted the US doesn't need Canada's cars, lumber, or energy. Period. This messaging was part of a broader trade strategy that demanded onshore manufacturing or tariffs. And yet here we stand, billions of taxpayer dollars earmarked for a polar fleet that US yards simply can't deliver. The Congressional Budget Office estimates a 60% cost overrun, prolonged schedules, and the first vessel not ready before 2029, or possibly 2030. We are facing workforce bottlenecks, design changes, and infrastructure backlogs. Rapid Arctic warming is opening new sea lanes, drawing competition from Russia's 57 ice-capable ships and China's new nuclear icebreaker project. Failing to build at home puts US sovereignty and supply chain control at risk. Enter Canada's Davie Shipbuilding, founded in 1825. This Quebec-based giant employs thousands across North America, Europe, and Africa, and is the continent's most storied Arctic shipbuilder. Its strategic upgrade investments, over $1 billion since 2012 and another $500 million planned, have positioned it at the forefront of polar ship design. Davie is now acquiring Texas shipyards and Finnish icebreaker expertise, creating a transatlantic pipeline that could deliver US icebreakers faster, cheaper, and more reliably. How fast? Helsinki's yards can design and build a high-end icebreaker in just 24 to 36 months. US yards take 4 to 5 years, if not longer. Cost too. Finnish-built polar vessels go for around €200 million, far below the bloated US projections. This is more than speed, it's stability and fiscal discipline. That speed matters. Arctic sea ice is disappearing on record. Maritime competition is rising. Russia has dozens of icebreakers, China is breaking into the nuclear game. The US Coast Guard barely has 3 operational vessels, Polar Star, Healy, and the refurbished Stories. Too few. Too late. From military resupply, scientific research to international law enforcement, these ships aren't just hardware. They are strategic instruments in a new high-stakes geopolitical theater. Faced with delays, Congress earmarked $8.6 billion for heavy, medium, and light polyice fleets. The Bipartisan Budget Act, nicknamed the Big Beautiful Bill, brought real money, but no domestic capacity. That's why in late 2024, the US, Canada, and Finland announced the Ice Pact, a trilateral framework aimed at building 70 to 90 ice-capable vessels over the next decade. This pact emphasizes workforce development, shared R&D, and vessel supply chain integration across allied yards. And it works around US procurement hurdles with national interest waivers. Right now, Coast Guard officials are preparing waiver requests to tap Canadian capabilities, marking the moment when Trump's Canada isn't needed poses a direct conflict with strategic reality. Let's shift to Davie's shipbuilding infrastructure. The Levi's, Quebec site spans 580,000 square meters, housed 5 huge construction bays, warehouses, dry docks, and over 900 meters of dock space. This setup allows multiple vessels to be built or repaired at once. Add the recent acquisition of Gulf Copper in Texas and the historic Helsinki shipyard, closed 25 years ago, now retooled for modern icebreaker demands. Finnish craftsmanship is legendary in Arctic hull design. Together, this integrated capacity could meet US contracts faster, reducing over $X billion in delays and lowering the price per ship dramatically. But let's pause. Trump publicly rejected Canadian participation. In early 2025, he explicitly asked, "Why would we buy from Canada?" during a briefing on Hurricane Helen. His comments, rooted in America First principles, illustrate the reactive tension. What is mission-critical is trumped out by political optics. Despite this, policymakers are pivoting. Some argue foreign-built icebreakers may be better than none, especially when national security is at stake. This scenario highlights a classic strategic tension, ideology versus practicality. In the short term, borrowing capacity may be pragmatic. Should US yards ramp up future expansion? Absolutely. But if doing so costs a decade, and national security, is it worth the delay? The plot thickens when you factor in the global race for Arctic presence. Russia sees opportunity, China sees access, and Canada is doubling down on icebreaker fleets. In 2023, Davie landed a $3.25 billion Canadian contract for a new Canadian heavy polar-class ship, along with ongoing projects in Vancouver and elsewhere. That expands capacity and creates an industrial ecosystem primed for allied cooperation. The stakes: who controls Arctic shipping, resource access, scientific research baselines, and strategic signaling. Icebreakers aren't just big ships. They are statements of presence. Canada's growing fleet, plus allied ice-packed vessels, challenges the US narrative that only America matters in Arctic policy. So your thinking question: can leadership rely solely on domestic policy when global dynamics demand offshore partnerships? Is purchasing from Canada and Finland a strategic surrender, or a wise investment in allied readiness? One more question: will Trump's rhetoric erode once Arctic realities bite? Or will it force a recalibration? Domestic capacity meets international necessity, in a post-America First world. Now, I want to know what you think. Should the US delay Arctic icebreaker programs to build domestic yards? Or should it partner with Canada and Finland for speed and capability? Comment below, your voice matters. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, help us get it higher in search, smash that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into geopolitics and national security, and tap the bell to never miss a future analysis. Thanks for sticking around. Until next time. Stay informed and stay alert.